I am so delighted to be here with my colleagues, Barbara Patterson and Nikki Baker. Nikki is one of our amazing consultants, and she's here to help man the chat and just have her wonderful presence here at our webinar tonight. And of course, to be here with Bruce and Louisa is just such a treat for this last in our series of the Spellography webinars. So, if you want to go to the next slide. There you go. Thank you. I just want to, in case any of you are tuning in that are not familiar, if you're not familiar with 95% Group, these are our foundational principles, and we always keep this in mind in the work that we do. We believe that all children deserve a chance to learn to read, and that's our purpose, is to unlock that power of literacy. And we commit to building on the science to empower teachers and actually leaders and all educators by supplying knowledge and resources and support that they need to transform our developing readers. And I'm really proud, if you want to go to the next slide, Bruce, to be part of this organization that has a very teacher-centric approach. You can trust that our literacy resources are classroom tested and proven, and that's really the promise that we make to you, and I believe it sets us apart in the marketplace. So this is our ecosystem approach. I just wanted to share this with you. I know there's kind of a lot going on here, but this is something that also sets us apart in the marketplace. What we see here is you see that we have core, assessment, and intervention, and all of that is really underscored with professional learning, I might add as well. So in our kind of flagship solution in core is our phonics core program. And we also have a phonemic awareness program called Pocket PA. Now you'll see that spellography fits right there in our core, right in that kind of intermediate space for our students in core instruction. We have a full suite of assessments that then also drive decision-making into intervention. And our flagship products in intervention are the phonemic awareness intervention that pairs with the Pocket PA, the phonics lesson library that pairs with the phonics core, RAP, which is our tier 3 solution, and you'll see where spellography also fits in that intervention space for our older students. So we are delighted to have spellography as part of our literacy ecosystem. And again, we've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 solutions underscored with professional learning, and spellography, which is a vital part that we're really honored to have as part of our core and intervention. Ta-da! So without further delay, I'd like to get into our main feature tonight. And so it gives me a great pleasure to introduce you to our speakers. And I don't think either one of them really needs much of an introduction. I know you all know Dr. Louisa Moats because she's a leading voice in literacy and a hero to many of us. She's a lifelong champion of teachers. She's been a teacher, a psychologist, a researcher, a faculty member at a graduate school level, author of many influential scientific journal articles and books and policy papers around reading and spelling and language and teacher preparation. You certainly know her as the co-author of Letters and the groundbreaking book, Speech to Print, Language Essentials for Teachers, among many other important works. She served as a board member and officer of the International Dyslexic Association for many years and led that committee that developed the IDA's knowledge and practice standards for teachers of reading, which we're really grateful for. She's here tonight to talk about spellography, and she co-authored spellography with our next guest, and that guest is Dr. Bruce Rosow, the co-author of spellography. Bruce began his career as an intermediate grade classroom teacher in Vermont before moving into remedial instruction and also serving as an academic dean. Dr. Rosow taught in the Language and Literacy program through the Reading Institute in Williamstown, Massachusetts, Simmons College, and Bay Path University. He ran the Language Lab at the Wyndham Central Supervisory Unit in Vermont, which provided remedial instruction to struggling middle and high school readers, and he's currently a private tutor. Louisa has shared that Bruce is an expert teacher who really brings spellography to life. And tonight we are in his masterful hands. So welcome to our guests, and I'll turn it over to you, Bruce.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. And, It's a real honor and pleasure to be here tonight with everyone. This is the last of our 4 webinars. These webinars parallel the construction of spellography in our layer cake conceptualization of language and how you teach language to teach readers and spellers. And so part 1 was about phonology and phonemic awareness. Part 2, orthography and spelling and the rules of spelling. Part 3, morphology and meaningful word parts and how they combine to build words out of the 3 main streams of language in Old English, Latin, and Greek. And then tonight, the piece about grammar and syntax and what those have to do with reading and spelling. The layer cake model is a way of visualizing what goes on in the brain as we read. And what happens is what's referred to sometimes as the PDP model, parallel distributed processing. Parallel meaning several things happening at the same time. Distributed meaning different parts of the brain are activated, and then processing that those different parts of the brain are communicating with each other. In that, think about a word as like a crystal or a stone, and the essence of that word being the spoken form. And when the spoken form is activated, it lights up all these other areas of the brain around that word, how the word is spelled, what it means, varied meaning in different contexts, and then the focus for tonight, which is usage. All of those aspects of a word are components of instruction in the layer cake nature of spellography. We have instructional routines that repeat themselves unit after unit, and those routines are mirror that layer cake structure I just spoke of, and they also allow teachers to get a comfort zone with what spellography is, how it works, so that once you have taught a handful of units, you get a sense of what's going on in day 1, what's going on day 3, what's going on day 6, etc. So there is a progression of study from the phonology, orthography, through morphology to usage that parallels the kinds of activities and routines that you'll get used to and your students will get used to. This slide is for you to take a gander at these examples and think a little bit about where we're headed tonight. And so these words are exemplars of the big idea, that being that we teach usage in order to understand the role of suffixes in spelling and reading. Prefixes present meaning, add meaning to a word, but suffixes have 2 jobs. They add meaning, but the major job is to signal usage. And so these examples give you a little taste of that. We'll come back to this slide near the end of the presentation. This is a slide both to add a little levity to the situation and also to recognize the role of teachers in our lives. And so this is a borrowing from a colleague that Louisa and I worked with years ago, Mike Minsky, and he passed this along. And when I think about Mike, I think about the idea that everything I know, I learned from a teacher. And Louisa is very prominent in that. Studying with Louisa was a life-changing experience for me and for many of us who have had that pleasure. But I also think about the audience tonight, all of you who are tuning in. And this is the end of another marathon, right? It's been another long, long year. And it's amazing what happens within a year and how much we do for our kids, how much we do for our communities, what it all means. And the fact that you are here tonight sharing this training, even though it's the end of the year, I'm sure you're all exhausted. It's unbelievable what we put out. It's a real honor to be sharing this presentation with you, knowing that we're at the tail end of this incredible school year. Syntax is the topic, and syntax has morphemes, syn meaning together, also sim, if you think of symphony, and the tax or arrangement side of that. And so syntax is the understanding of word arrangement or word order, how certain words fit in certain places in a sentence, and why that is, and what the logic of that is. And knowledge of syntax is really critical. We know that knowledge of syntax happens early in child development, that when children enter school with rich oral language development, it allows easier access to literacy, and that when children enter school without that oral language development, that's a predictor of real struggles. And working with kids in middle school who have struggled to internalize the rules of syntax early on in preschool, you come to see how incredibly complicated this understanding is and how difficult it is to remediate. So this knowledge of syntax correlating with overall verbal expression ability, written expression, and reading comprehension is that piece about speech to print, that oral language is the foundation for literacy. Syntax is its own layer in the layer cake. It is not the same as meaning or semantics. And so you can have nonsense, colorless green ideas sleep furiously, that famous sentence. And syntactically, that sounds like an English sentence. If you take the same nonsense and rearrange it, furiously sleep ideas, green, colorless, it's all jumbled. And we can hear the difference as native speakers. We can hear the difference that just doesn't sound right. And so you see the examples here where nonsense starts out sounding like sense, and then as it becomes jumbled up, it's still nonsense, but it's also disordered in example 2 and example 3. So language is, Steven Pinker calls it an instinct, something that humans gravitate to. Humans all across the world develop language. It comes organically and represents the way in which our minds are given to experience the world. And there's a breakdown into two main aspects, especially when you have like an infant and they're playing at the table, and there may be a toy, and the toy disappears. And for a certain stage of development, that toy is gone. And then at a certain stage of development, the infant starts looking for the toy to reappear. And that's the stage at which they know not only does that entity exist, but that change happens. That the entity exists, that is the noun, that is the stuff of our experience. The change, that is the action. And so we have these two very fundamental concepts, that there is stuff and that change happens to that stuff. This translates into what is a sentence. A sentence is a noun phrase and a verb phrase at a very simple level. Now, I'm also going to contrast this phrase structure definition of a sentence with a second version. So this is part 1. Part 1 is this idea that entities exist so that there are noun phrases, and change happens. So there's a verb phrase that describes that change. Words can now fit into one of those two sides of that seesaw. Phrases have the ability to perform just like words in a sentence, like a noun phrase performs like a noun. A verb phrase performs like a verb. Phrases can be built of words, of course, and those words can be particular parts of speech, but they combine in a phrase. So now we have two levels. We have a level of a phrase that operates, say, as a noun. But within that phrase, we have words that can operate as a determiner, the, or that, or an adjective, what kind, silly, what, dog, prepositional phrase, where. And then we can have the verb phrase. And again, a verb phrase can have embedded in it a noun phrase, so nouns, and prepositional phrases that will have a preposition and other parts of speech embedded in it. So now we've got this dual level of what words do. What words do is what phrases do. Now here is a whole second way of looking at what a sentence is. A sentence is a noun phrase plus a verb phrase. It's one way, phrase structure. But the verb and what is necessary to make the verb happy, that's another way of looking at a sentence that is more targeted toward meaning. So in this case, the verb is put. And so the question is, what is that verb demanding? What is mandatory? When we use the verb put, what else must we add to make meaning? We can say the boy put, and we know something is missing. If we say the boy put the cat, well, that doesn't really work either. There's still something missing. If we say the boy put on the dog, well, we're still not there. Put requires a put what and where, a location, a what and a where. When we have the what, the cat, and the where on the dog, now the verb is happy, put is happy. One way of looking at a sentence is the verb is the boss, and when the verb is happy, you have a sentence. So now we've got two ways, phrase structure, noun phrase, verb phrase, and then the verb. The verb's the boss, make the verb happy, you have a sentence. The point of all this is to get to suffixes. We want to understand suffixes because we cannot sound out suffixes. Suffixes are spelled and read based on other kinds of clues of how they function. And so what are suffixes? How do they work? Well, suffixes mark parts of speech. What are parts of speech? Labels that we give to words that answer certain questions. So usage is determined by asking questions. If we have a word that answers what kind, like hopeful, it's a describer, it's an adjective. If we have a word that answers the question what or who, that's a noun. Did what, that's a verb. And so questions help us to identify both phrases. This is a noun phrase. It tells us what? What? The purple penguin. Did what? Wonkily, waddled, past Pete, just now, and et cetera, et cetera. So questions are the key to unlocking this mysterious thing called parts of speech or usage. In the beginning units in Book A and in Book B in Spellography, we do a lot of work with this idea of filling slots that answer questions, and therefore creating a very simplified grammar that teaches parts of speech. And again, the pot of gold at the end of that rainbow is we're teaching parts of speech for word study. Spellography specifically is not a writing program. It's a decoding, reading, and spelling program. And we're teaching the spelling of suffixes by understanding usage. And so, who did it? Yogi. Then it's a noun. Did what? Chase. Then it's a verb. And as we go along here, we start expanding on those phrases. We can have a, what kind of player? A soccer player. Scored how? Well, quickly. So these questions, how refers to the action. It's going to be part of that verb side of the equation, adverb. What kind? The soccer, describing player. Well, if it's what kind, it answers that question, what kind? It's an adjective. It's describing what kind of noun, what kind of player. And so we help students to begin to use this questioning method to make sense of the job, the role, the part of speech that a particular word has, either in the noun phrase or the verb phrase part of the sentence. So phrases function like words in that they will answer a question. So we have sentences here that are parsed in different places. And the question for the students is to see which one is correct. And the way that you determine which phrase parsing is correct is based on which questions get answered. Who? The cranky duck. Okay. What kind of cranky duck? With the wacky quack. Quack fits with what kind. Quack doesn't fit with the verb. What kind doesn't answer how the cranky duck dives. So quack does not fit with that dives. Knowing that a phrase will answer a question, what kind of cranky duck, helps to understand where that next section or that next phrase ends. So we play around with these funny sentences in order to reinforce this idea of phrases that modify the noun, telling what kind, phrases that modify the verb, telling us how the action was done or where it was done or when it was done, etc. So again, working with phrases, we have prepositional phrases. Earlier on in the book, we work with prepositions as prefixes. We do this kind of work you see here where those prefixes as preposition prefixes are introduced. We build words. We bold the prepositions. We read those kind of words, shows us boundary markers for the words. But the point here is to use those prepositions and prepositional phrases. And here you see that a prepositional phrase can function as an adjective. A prepositional phrase can function as an adverb. The identification of which way the phrase goes is based on what question the phrase answers. Again, the foundational instructional concept is to ask what question is being answered either by the word or by the phrase. And that will inform you about usage. And again, why do we want to know about usage? Because it's going to teach us about suffixes and how they work. So here we play around with prepositional phrases. The same prepositional phrase could work as an adjective telling what kind, or it could work as an adverb telling where or when or how. So we use a very simplified question bin in order to identify parts of speech. So let's get to that. We have in Unit 7 words that use TH as an initial spelling. And through exploration, students discover that when the TH it's an interdental fricative. When it's voiced, that buzzy ends up spelling a function word, as you see on the slide. When that TH is quiet, like in the word thin, those are content words. Thinly, however, with that ly suffix, is now going to tell how. Thinly also could work as, ly can also work in other ways, but in that word thinly to answering how, and therefore adverb. Words that answer the question how are adverbs. Thickly, how. Thorny, what kind? Thorny problem. Okay, so when you get this questioning method, which is straightforward, I hope, then it unlocks the way in which these suffixes are working in these words. So one way to work with this is through anagrams. And anagrams, one way to resolve or solve anagrams is to start to identify the suffixes and to see what kind of questions they're answering and therefore where it's going to fit in your reassembly of the sentences. Unscrambled eggs. So we do a lot of this work in spellography. You'll find this work usually in lesson 6 of the different units. And the clue is to ask the question, see what question the word answers, and then use that to help with your reassembly of the anagram. All right, so now let's take this and put it to work. This idea of suffixes have 2 jobs, add meaning and provide usage, mark usage, and let's see how this all works. So suffixes oftentimes are in an unaccented part of the word. That means that students who use the strategy of sounding out to spell are going to be out of luck. You can't sound out whether the end of a word is going to be spelled A-R, O-R, or E-R if it sounds like So this activity is intended to point that out. Say lar, and then you say cellular. Nope, it's not that, it's cellular. You say gar, vinegar. Nope, vinegar. Gar becomes gur. Sore becomes censor. Sore becomes sir. So in each of these cases, the spelling is different, but the sound of that suffix is the same. You cannot sound out these suffixes. So what do we use to help with spelling? Well, we can use 2 concepts. One is word origin, and the other is usage. So Old English suffixes, oftentimes we use ER, and we use ER as a suffix to name a noun, who or what. Farmer is someone who farms, a burner is something that burns. Latin, we tend to use OR for nouns, and especially Latin words that end in S, like compress, or T as in conduct, or with the suffix ate. And so a sailor is someone who sails, a reflector is something that reflects. Again, you've got these choices of ER or OR for a noun. AR is sometimes used, like in liar, but is much less frequent to signal a noun, a who or a what. AR is seldom used to spell nouns. Those are most of them, most of the common AR nouns. But AR and the connector ULAR is very, very common for adjectives. What kind? Circular. What kind? Cellular, tubular. And so that when it is marking an adjective, will be AR. Okay, there's a clue, there's a useful clue that can get you to that proper spelling. When we have adjectives made with the suffix ER, those are comparative adjectives. Quieter, smarter, richer. So you have words that answer what kind, but the ER is going to answer or give an answer that's going to be this comparative more than, whereas the AR is going to be an adjective that is much more global. What kind? So here you see an example of that where we've got these AR or ULAR suffixes. In a lot of cases, when you take those suffixes off, you don't get a full word. But if you have the ULAR connector, oftentimes you do muscular, muscle, rectangular, rectangle, etc. So now we have some clarity around spelling adjectives. ER is interesting in that you can use the ER suffix for nouns, for adjectives, and it's the only one of the 3 that also spells verbs. So there's a unique position for the ER. When we put all this together, we can see that the trickiest aspect is spelling nouns, that ER or OR are our main choices, and that we can use to differentiate those spellings is it Old English or is it Latin? That's not always the case, but it's a general rule. And then the nature of the word. Is it a common word? Is it a more complex word? We know in terms of adjectives, it's pretty clear cut. If we're talking about an adjective that's comparative, then we're using ER more than. If we're using other adjectives, AR is our choice. And then verbs, again, there's only one choice. So putting usage to work allows us to clarify spelling that's really a mud pit for many, many kids, this ER-OR-AR problem. A second example is ICAL versus CLE. The ICAL words are going to tell us what kind. They will work as adjectives, whereas the other ones are nouns. So we can have a cubicle, cubicle. Cubicle being what kind of cubicle. So the spelling reflects the same phoneme sequence, the same sound sequence at the end of the word. What's the clue for spelling? Meaning and usage. So we take these kinds of words and use them. And Louisa is a major motivator for that. She has written a lot of the exercises that take these words and ask students to use them. And in the usage, then they get more of this experience of what kind of spelling marks what kind of job, answers what kind of question, fits in what place in the sentence. Now, a complexity to all this is that the same suffix might work different ways in different words. And so ly, in these examples down at the bottom, you're getting adverbs, words that answer how, hastily packed, luckily won. But sometimes the same suffix, again, can function in different ways. If I say, I pluck my guitar like Barry plucked his guitar, the ED is what we call an inflectional suffix. It is a suffix that is not changing the part of speech, and a lot of the common Old English suffixes work that way. So pluck is a verb, plucked is a verb. Dog is a noun, dogs is a noun. So these are suffixes that do not change usage, but do change something about the meaning. However, if we look at the ing in dancing, dancing dogs, dancing in red, what kind? That's an adjective. Word dancing, dancing in blue answers did what? Same spelling, but now we have a verb application. That gets back to our foundation of teaching students to understand usage through this process of asking questions. So we see this way in which suffixes can take on different roles frequently, let's say. We can have the southward trail. What kind of trail? Southward. We follow the trail southward. Where did we follow? Southward. Now southward is acting as an adverb to describe where. So add to that the fact that final Y sometimes is not a suffix. Sometimes the final Y turns a word into an adjective. Sometimes it's just part of the noun, like daddy. So using these words in context is critically important, and we provide activities throughout Spellography for that very thing, the application of the words in sentences so that you can determine usage. ly, same kind of construct. ly we normally think of as an adverbial suffix. How? How do we eat? We merrily ate. Had we grin? We sheepishly grinned. But we can also add ly to a noun and turn it into an adjective, the saintly man, the goodly amount, the yearly bonus. Again, the principle is, what question is the word answering? If it's what kind, the word is functioning as an adjective. If it's how, the word is functioning as an adverb. The suffix ate takes us another step up, gets us into book C and then book D of Spellography. And the idea that accent and unaccented nature of suffixes has a lot to do with why suffixes are so difficult to spell and why you need additional clues such as usage to get you there. And so some of these ATE words can be pronounced two different ways. You can advocate, you can be an advocate. You can moderate, or you can be a moderate. And so whether or not the ATE is accented, where you hear the long eight, a long A and eight, verb form, advocate, graduate. When the ATE is unaccented, as in it, graduate, then you've got a noun form. You can also have moderate, an adjective form. So the unaccented form has different roles. And so again, you are working with this suffix. You are showing how it operates when it's accented, when it's unaccented, where it fits, and therefore identifying its role or its part of speech. And so more of the same. We use suffixes in Latin-based words as derivational suffixes. Again, many of the basic suffixes in Old English are inflectional suffixes, meaning they do not change the part of speech. But in Latin, suffixes are often added to change the part of speech. Derive comes from di, to, and rive, river, meaning something that's branching off. It was a noun, now it's an adjective. It was an adjective, now it's an adverb. Something is changing in the usage of a word, and the suffix is marking that change. And in Latin, the complexity is higher because accent shift gets involved. You also have connector syllables like the UL in these cases. And so that gets us into Book D and preparation for students getting to that higher level of text, the higher level of word use that they're going to find in content classes and literature in middle school and high school. We do a lot of work with adding suffixes, taking suffixes off, understanding what's changed about parts of speech. And one thing that is critical is that the prerequisites for doing this kind of work have been established before you get to Book D, before you get to the higher level of word study. And in particular, what I'm referring to here are rules for suffixes, rules for endings, the doubling rule, the silent E rule, and the Y rule. Those have to be mastered before you start getting into the complexity of Latin form. And so we do this work with finding the derivational forms of a word. What is the simplest form? What are the different forms where you're adding one suffix? What are the forms where you're adding compound suffixes? All right, so circling back around to where we started. In the first set, you see the the ER, the IR, I'm sorry, the ER, the OR, the AR, and the way in which bird feeder, okay, that's Old English. It's a noun. ER, processor. Well, we see that that is Latin form. How do we know that? Well, we've been studying how do you build words in Old English? Well, you compound words, bird, feeder, compound word form, that's Old English. But Latin is a root, ses, which won't necessarily stand on its own, and prefix in this case, and then the suffix. So seeing the form of the word is a clue that can help you understand, oh, is this an OR1? And then the fact that it's a root that uses the S ending, that is another clue. Cellular, you get that UL connector, ULR, and again, the word functions as what kind? Cellular. Adjective. Adjective words use AR. So these are clues that we work with our students to develop so that they are thinking about these kinds of questions. What's the usage? What's the suffix that marks that usage? Okay, I got it. Cubicle, we talked about the ICAL forming a what kind of, and the CLE being more of not a suffix, but a noun form. You see burly as what kind of bear? So burly, therefore, the adjective form of ly. And barely, how did it budge? Words that answer how? Adverb. Same suffix, different usage. And then the ATE, as we just went over a slide or two ago. And the way that, depending on accented or unaccented, marks the kind of usage that ATE signals. All right, so that is the whirlwind tour of syntax and suffixes. And I hope some of that was illuminating. I hope that explains to you the rationale for where we go when we discuss grammar and syntax in spellography, our purpose, which is for students to understand the nature of suffixes and how they work and how they're spelled, and why once we've established that, that's where we stop. Because spellography is not per se a writing program, but it is a program to help students to understand how words are used so that they can better read and spell them.
Well, Bruce, I guess I better chime in here. It's just awesome what you've outlined. I think a lot of us are probably going to go back through the recording of what you just presented more slowly and really take it in. And even I, as your co-author, was thinking hard as you were presenting all these illustrations that we have throughout the book, because what you've been able to describe so ably is our basic approach here, which is that learning to spell requires simultaneous parallel processing of all layers of language, because the spelling system itself represents sound, meaning, word origin, and usage. That is built into the spelling system itself. And as I was hearing you again, of course, we've been working for 20 plus years on this. And Bruce has been working with these lessons with students far more than I have, and has educated me. I want everyone to know this. Even though he was my student originally, he took everything he learned from my speech to print text, etc., and not only taught it, but has realized it in this instructional sequence for kids. So what we're striving to do, I think, is unusual. When people talk about teaching spelling, they usually want kids to memorize a list of words. But what we have found, and what I think research supports, is that they can't retain words just by learning them by rote or practicing by rote. And what we're after is insight into every aspect of a word structure. and when we're now working on book D to get book D in the pipeline, and the whole framework for book D is what we have in mind, and our lead character, Hari, who is an Indian American spelling champion, just like the real ones who just won this National Spelling Bee and who've won the National Spelling Bee over and over again. What they study is other languages besides English in order to understand if a word is incorporated into English from another language. And, besides Old English, we have Latin, Greek, French, Spanish, etc. Then when they want to spell a word that they're not sure of, they say, how do you pronounce it? Are there alternative pronunciations? What does the word mean? Can you use it in a sentence? So that's a reflection back of what we're trying to accomplish with this instructional approach. We want kids to think about all those angles from which they might truly understand how what a word is made of. And as I've worked on this with Bruce, I've learned a lot more about things like, well, ULAR, Euler, of course it's an AR because that's part of the structure and it's an adjective and so on. I've become myself much more sensitive. And I think many of the teachers who are listening to us tonight will probably be thinking, I didn't know that. This is new information. And so we've structured this program and we structured the lessons so that everything is explained and it's very systematic and cumulative. So if you as a teacher don't already know these more sophisticated and deep things that our orthography represents, fine, you can discover them and learn them right along with the kids. That's what I would have been doing if I were in your shoes. And then I'm thinking of as I listen to this, the Perfetti's concept of deep lexical quality that really characterizes what we are after. And I'm afraid sometimes that if we use the term spelling, that conjures up for people another list of words for kids to learn by rote, which is not at all what we're after. We're after word knowledge in every respect. And we have seen from especially Bruce and his work with kids, that deepening word knowledge enables kids to be able to read and spell those words that are then incorporated into their mental dictionaries with association to all of these linguistic features that are part of each word. A word is a linguistic object, right, that carries meaning, and that a written word represents meaning. So that's my thought. And I'm sure now we have some questions from our viewers. Nikki, have you been looking at them?
There are some great questions. So first, question a few times in the chat box, this might be for Laura or Barbara, is a question about digital materials. Is it just print? Is that coming?
It is just print. So yes, and I think we've got the link to the website so you can learn more about the products and you can sample the products. Yeah.
Okay, great. So another
Can I say something, Nikki?
Yes,
I don't know if you just saw that comment, but somebody just wrote, I want to be like Bruce when I grow up.
I actually
shout out.
I took a screenshot of that so I wouldn't forget. Yes, I want to be Bruce when I grow up. This was so informative. Thank you, Laura. I think we all want to be Bruce when we grow up. I think that's
Amen. Yeah.
pretty fair. So a couple of really nice questions. First of all, what about communicating with parents? Is any of this homework? Is this all in class? That's a nice question.
That's a very nice question. And boy, always yes. I mean, it's amazing the impact of parents being interested in being part of the reading and spelling work that kids do. And this one is unusual. This program's unusual because Louisa said, well, there aren't 20 words to memorize. It doesn't work that way. But sharing this with parents and having conversations about, did you know this about this word? That's just golden. The way in which teachers choose to use spellography may include homework, may not include homework. It is a tool for teachers to use to teach the way they teach. And in some cases, starting and modeling an activity and then assigning it is perfectly fine. The key thing is that at a certain point, the teacher gets to review what the student has done. You know, you can ask 3 before you ask me, or however you organize that kind of review in your classroom. But the idea that you may not get through a lesson in a day, you may have a certain time frame that you have in mind with your school and the way in which you want to cover this program, that homework might be one of the ways in which you expand the instructional time. But again, the caveat being to make sure you're seeing the work that your students are doing and using the daily dictations and using the speed reads and other information to monitor progress.
Bruce, will you speak just a minute to our students with dyslexia and how this works with cognitive load theory? Is it too much? Just how does that all fit together?
Cognitive load theory.
Good question, right?
Well, it's about pacing. It's about intensity of instruction, and it's about pacing. And so again, this is a tool, how one carpenter uses a hammer versus another carpenter using that hammer. How a teacher looking at the fit between this program and their students decides to organize instruction. When I was a classroom teacher, I always had grouping, and I always started the beginning of the year by teaching my kids how to work that way, the Greenfield Center School, and how you operate a classroom so that kids are respectful and take turns. And so some classrooms, it's going to be the whole class doing the same exercises all at the same time. But if it was my classroom, it wouldn't be that. It would be groups working at different speeds. And so that would allow me to titrate how much review I do, how much direct teaching I do, how much modeling I do. All of those are factors that teachers know because they know their kids and they know the way that they structure their classroom. Spellography allows for that kind of flexibility in approach.
But I want to add something to that, Bruce. As we're writing these activities, what's foremost in my mind is the teacher is actively verbally engaged in explaining the concepts. This is not something you hand to kids and send them off to work silently. There's a lot of modeling the pronunciation of words, talking about their meanings, talking through the examples, making sure kids can read the words that we're asking them to use in the exercise and so on. So it is very much a teacher-led instructional program, wouldn't you say?
Yes. Yep.
So as far as assessment goes, it's not a traditional Friday assessment of the spelling. So the question is, you know, where are the assessments as you're going through? So would you say that's the daily dictation piece that you're checking in to see how they're doing with that concept?
Yeah, and that's a great question. It came up last webinar as well. I'm sure it's in people's minds about that, because again, it's not here are the 20 words and at the end of the lesson, did you spell them all correctly? And yeah, it's more fine-tuned than that. It's being able to see the correct or the responses or the error responses in the moment with the particular exercises, and then the check on that is the spelling dictation. and also the reading fluency activities, which I find to be incredibly sensitive markers for progress that students are making. And I really encourage teachers to know in their classroom which are the students that are needing the most support, and that those students that need the most support get time to do those reading fluency activities with the teacher. And there's lots of ways in which you can manage that. There's ways in which you read with all your students, but some of your students you read more often. There's ways in which you can pair students up. But those two activities in particular, the dictation and the reading, speed reading or quick reads or reading fluency, whatever you want to call it, those are particularly sensitive markers of progress.
And also there is a review, there's a review at the end of each unit that is for monitoring progress. And there is a bigger review at the end of, no, review at the end of each lesson and review at the end of each unit, sorry. And then a review at the end of each book. So those are built-in ways of monitoring progress and retention. And then we have surveys, diagnostic surveys for each book, so that you can use those for estimating where to plug kids in.
Great. You know, I think we're coming up at time. I know we still have many more questions. Nikki, was there one more question you want to ask? We might have time for one more.
Really interesting question that came up twice, maybe quickly. How do we get kids to the distinction between awe and awe?
Good question.
That's a goodie to end on.
I'll give a quick answer, and then Louisa give you last licks here. Minimal pair, working with minimal pair words, ha and paw, walk and walk. Some people cannot distinguish these words anyway, but minimal pair chains is probably the most effective. And I'm sure Louisa is also going to speak about articulatory gestures.
Yeah, ah is an open vowel at the bottom of the vowel progression. That's why it is organized as the vowel valley. Ah is wide open. And aw, your lips are rounded and your tongue is pulled farther back. So try that, ah and aw. In some areas of the country, that is a non-existent distinction, however, just as I and eh. In parts of the country, I and eh are non-existent distinction in dialect. So we have to manufacture awareness of the difference. These sounds exist. They're represented differently in spelling. You got to at least know what they're supposed to be, even if in your spontaneous speech you don't make that distinction. You have to conceptually make that distinction in order to remember spelling.
Great, good question. So thank you so much. Nikki, thank you so much for monitoring the chat for us. And Louisa and Bruce, such an honor. You know, one of our participants, Jody, said, I learned so many new things. And that's one thing I will say about all 4 of these webinars that we've done is I think it's just been so enriching to us. And you mentioned, Louisa, something about, you know, enabling kids to understand the language, enabling our teachers to learn alongside their students, to understand the language, to deepen their own understandings. And I think that is such a perfect way to just show how this is such a wonderful fit with 95% group and that empowerment of educators to know things that maybe we didn't learn in our teacher preparation program through the use of these wonderful resources with students that really make a difference. And Bruce, it's just so wonderful to hear from you because you're the ultimate practitioner who has really made such a difference in students' lives. And we appreciate you and honor you so much for that. So as we wrap up, Thank you again for all of you for being here tonight and for your great questions. So Bruce, if you want to take it to the next slide. I just want to let you all know that we have some upcoming Spellography virtual product workshops led by Nikki Baker, our resident expert here. And registration is not open yet. It will open on Monday, June 24th. And so you can check our website and learn more about how to register starting on June 24th. So we got lots of upcoming workshops. So exciting. And here's contact information. If you want to know more about 95% Group, our products and services, here's my contact information. And also here's all of our regional account executives and what states they cover. So if you're interested in learning more just about 95% Group and all our products and services, check out who your regional account executive is and be sure to reach out to that person. So again, Bruce and Louisa, this has been an amazing series, just incredible professional learning for all of us. Nikki, thank you. Barbara, thank you for all you do to make sure that these webinars are available to our participants. Any final thoughts, any final questions we need to express before we adjourn for the evening?
Well, I'm just so excited about it being out in the world, and I'm grateful to 95% Group for publishing Spellography and supporting it. You've been great to work with. Thank you. And Bruce, you know, my treasured colleague. Yay, onward we go.
Onward we go. And to everybody who participated tonight, congratulations on getting through another school year, for your service to our kids, for being here tonight and showing such dedication to take the time to be with us tonight. I'm really hugely honored that you've been here with us. And Louisa, of course, has been guiding light to many of us. So just what a wonderful experience to be working on this with her and with the team here. So thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that. Good night, everybody. Have a pleasant evening or afternoon, wherever you might be. And thanks again for tuning in.